Coming next year from Pastor with No Answers Land, it's the Goodness Gracious Small Group podcast. It's going to be one hell of a small group. Join us.
All right, what's up, listeners? Hey, I want to take a second to set a tone that's important for me. And then after that point, people are going to have to take this conversation however the heck they are going to take it. Because it's honest. Well, I can't vouch for these other three that they aren't liars. I mean, how can I read their minds? Here's the deal. You're going to hear from one of my longest and best friends in the whole world. In fact, of all my best homies, I've had him the longest, the only one of my best friends from high school. He's family. And if you have a best homie, you know what I mean by family. But he is a little bashful here, I'll have to say. We're going to get back together for a follow-up discussion. The four of us, the three you're about to meet and me. And I'm going to have to tell him not to conceal his assholeness so much. But in this conversation, family takes on a broader sense for me, and it's important for me to communicate with you. I take community very, very serious and see it in deeper ways than what I think most people see it as. That's why it took real deep soul searching to give up on past friendships 5 years ago, because to me, outside of extreme situations, there's something about community that lasts forever, at least in my head. A small group that me and Priscilla were a part of, all of us, young couples having babies or trying to have babies. We don't meet anymore, but we're still family. We'd all be there for one another in an instant because of time invested literally over 10 years ago. So Gail and Billy, the other two who join us today, I haven't stayed in close contact with. Delightfully caught up with Billy last year, as well as some other old dear friends at a youth group reunion. I may have not talked to Gail since we graduated from high school together, but back in the day, we carpooled together, knew one another relatively well, and as much as any teenagers could, I feel we both had a respect level for our friendship, as we even went back as kids at a different church. Billy's a mixed bag for me. We're neighborhood community as well as church community, both ran with some of the same folks, but then he joined the youth group that we were all a part of, and thus the four of us all share this common bond of community. We shared time together in such formative years, took trips together, and given our parents' involvement in this church community in some unique ways, we were all we had. So are you hearing me here? I hold back none in this conversation, as honest as I can about what I feel was very detrimental theology, and given my unique or bizarre mental wiring wrought with depression and anxiety as a kid, theology that I believe messed me up for a very, very long time. Some things unhealthy I may never grow out of completely, but I really don't hold anyone responsible. People that taught me were taught what their teachers were taught, and I personally have never experienced like a situational church hurt. I can't think of any situation at the hands of a church that I had a hard time forgiving. Although we had left a church a long time ago and I was young, if I had been older, I would have had some discernment to see just how difficult of a time that was for my parents as well as my extended family when they left that church. We had a leader, rest in peace. He actually did my family wrong, but we're talking adult conflict, nothing crazy. Some unhealthy teachings nowhere found in the Bible for sure. Very judgmental environment. Incorrect stuff, like but I even love that guy, but there were things that my whole family had a right to feel hurt about, and I was just too busy being a teen to really notice or care. But that church that we left was the church I attended from the time I was 8 to the time I was 16, most of my formidable years. The guys I'm talking to today were part of the youth group I migrated to when my parents left this church family of 8 years I was just talking about. Those 8 years was a major conduit in which I had a lot of bad theology programmed into my already jacked up brain. I'm sure I'll unpack it for years to come on this podcast and other spaces, but I've learned over the years the fear in my theological beliefs were the main culprit of my agony, anxiety, and depression. I do believe it was the culprit. But again, I also understand a lot of it was my pre-existing disposition. But I'll also say this. I love these people. I've seriously considered trying to have a reunion with these folks I was in fellowship with for 8 years as a kid. One man from those olden days, Terry Smoke, rest in peace. I consider top 5 most influential guys in my teen years. Another guy, Mike Merle, to this day tells me how proud he is of me. He probably doesn't know how much that means to me. I'll occasionally text my friend Lisa from youth group. Her mom, rest in peace, Miss Candy, and my mom were best friends for a time. I felt like she was a little sister. And as we relate as adults, she still is in my head. So this isn't coming from animosity. This is just an open conversation, although I do believe that ugly does come out anytime there's a gathering of humans, even in the church. That's why we need a savior. Some of these stories, I hope, are delivered with the best intentions in this episode. At least for me, as a self-identified pastor, in its real definition, when people share hurt, I just simply want to listen. And that's partly what I wanted to do today, is listen and have adult conversations with things we experience as kids. But I'll say that almost all of the adults in both churches, who I at least was close to, and there are a lot, had my best intentions in mind and wanted to serve the Lord, wanted to love their neighbors. I realize I'm super lucky, blessed, what have you, to be able to say that. But even though I think I believe very differently from a lot of people in those church communities, the community we had was dear, and that's the posture of my heart in this conversation.
Oh, good.
Good. Do y'all both have headphones on?
No.
I don't have headphones.
You don't own headphones?
I don't own headphones.
Me either.
All right. When y'all were entering Riverside, did y'all tell Riverside that you don't have headphones?
It didn't ask.
It didn't ask. Okay, cool. All good then.
I was about to say, is that like a high school? I thought it was some sort of joke.
Oh, as far as Riverside?
Riverside High? Is that the Archie gang?
Nope.
Yes.
Nope. It's this here contraption for podcasters called Riverside. It's like Zoom for podcasters.
I'm a low-tech man in a high-tech world.
Gail, I have not seen your live face, so like non-still picture stuff. And maybe, I'm trying to think, when would we have seen each other since high school?
High school.
Like, do you really think it's been high school? That's crazy.
Surely not.
Maybe once or twice at church. We took the kids probably when they were 3 or 4 to church.
I think I stayed at the church maybe through, I guess it was through college. When I came home, I was still there. Yeah, you're probably right. But
John, you look like your daddy.
Yeah, that apple didn't far too fall.
Is it weird for you, Gail? Because y'all probably haven't seen each other in a while either,
Yeah.
huh?
Yes, and you look like your dad. So I'm like, whoa.
I'm just talking to a bunch of old men.
I'm like, whoa. Nope. Now we just see Billy. If I could see, he looks like his daddy.
Yeah.
Hey, Gail, I hate asking you this because if it's like a bad answer, but is your mom still alive?
Yes.
Okay.
She is.
All right, cool.
She lives in Somerville.
Gotcha. She doing all right?
Yeah. She's Betty. She's not going easy.
Yeah.
You know.
I was thinking about her the other day because she used to make those stuffed peppers.
Yes.
With the rice and the beef in it. Man.
Yeah.
That was good stuff.
Good.
That's what I was thinking about Betty the other day just because I was hungry.
We were home in June because my oldest nephew got married, and that my kid was like, I need Nana to cook. Yep.
Now, how long have you not lived in Charleston? When did you move away?
2008.
2008. Okay. And that was, were you already married?
Yes.
Okay. So did you meet your husband in Charleston?
Yes.
All right. I'm really getting updates here. This is like major life updates. So you met your husband in Charleston around when? Because I would say it's safe to say you and I, the three of us graduated in 95. It's safe to say you and I lost contact at least 97, 98. So
yes,
we're talking over 25 years ago. You met your husband in Charleston?
Yep. He actually is from Pittsburgh, and he followed a girl down to South Carolina. She turned out to be a little crazy, and we met. So 24 years.
Gotcha. I followed John's cousin to college. She was not crazy, but I ended up meeting my wife at college, and it wasn't
Heck
John's
yeah.
cousin. And you guys have not seen each other since, I would say, high school also?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably about the same time.
So some funny, really old school connections is the guy that we are waiting for. We probably would not be seeing him tonight because he would have never been connected to our church had he not dated Gail's sister. In fact, if I remember correctly, that would be kind of his salvation story, is coming to youth group because of Val's invitation. That would be my guess.
My dad's invitation, but yes.
How'd that happen?
Missionary dating.
Gotcha.
Bill say, I ain't gonna fly, boy, you gotta go to church.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. So they date. Okay, gotcha. So they dated, and your dad invited him to church.
Yeah.
Sweet.
That was the stipulation. You could not date his daughters unless you went to church. As a
Gotcha.
matter of fact, that's how Andy ended up coming to our church.
Y'all just a regular missionary dating family.
Yes, we've reached out to all.
I don't know. It just seems like missionary should be a word that when it comes to like relationships, we should maybe just avoid. It just sounds weird.
Yeah.
I was just trying to provide for an awkward moment.
Hello.
Did I succeed, John?
You succeeded. It was there.
There you go. Look,
What's up, Billy? Oh. Billy, you came
Phone
right.
gentleman and lady.
Yeah, you came right in the nick of time because we just started to talk about you, and so far it's all been neutral, but it could have turned south pretty soon. So
I'm glad I'm here to defend my honor.
Now you are here, and I just want to say, so Billy, I'll catch our listeners up on me and your relationship because I was just reflecting on how I have not seen Gail for well over 25 years. If you haven't been clued in yet with John and John's one of my best friends, so him and I are, we've always been in touch. Billy, you and I got to reconnect recently at our youth group reunion. Gail wasn't there, dadgummit, but you had miles and miles to travel. Totally get it. Getting old, it sounds cheesy, but I'll just use the word beautiful. But I do think it's beautiful that the four of us have never hung out as adults, not the four of us together. And we're going to be talking about life experiences of like 25 years ago. And we all know how much we've changed. And I don't know. It's just something I've had these conversations before.
Gail, one of the best moments at the little youth group
John.
reunion was Joey walked up to Jennifer's now current husband and says,
no.
Man, you remember driving around that blue Honda? And Rick was like, I have no idea who you are.
And I pushed it at least, Gail, I pushed it at least 2 more times. I said,
he would not
yeah,
let it go.
I was like, you're Honda. We wrote, I think he may have used the phrase, you're freaking me out a little bit. And then all of a sudden it hit me, you're not Nate. But if you look at a picture of those two guys and how they were dressed that night, they had similar shirts, similar vibes. But I literally was talking to Jennifer's husband like he was Nate. And like he was crazy for not knowing what I was talking about.
Quit messing with me, Nathan. Come on, give me a hug.
Like the whole 6 degrees of separation.
Right.
We used to call Jennifer's husband when he was on radio. I don't know if he's still on radio, but we used to talk to him as a DJ on the radio.
That's funny.
That is full circle. So, Gail, I have recently reconnected with Stoy Prelo, and those conversations have just been magical because I literally have not talked to him since high school. And we had a couple of episodes with Antonio Seabrook, who I was like best friends with in middle school. And then him and I had lost contact kind of in high school. We saw each other around, but it's like talking about childhood stuff with people that you haven't seen since you were children. It's pretty crazy. And I do feel, I'll shut up in a second here, guys. I do feel like this is kind of a culmination episode in some way, shape, or form. It really is kind of special to have you guys here because I've been talking about my, say, troubled upbringing on podcast for years, from Bad Christian to Pastor with No Answers. My faith has changed tons, and I feel like all this time, part of what I've been growing out of some of what I would call toxic religion, and here I am with three folks who were part of the same faith community that, in my opinion, was the vessel of that bad theology as a whole. The community, you guys aren't bad vessels. That'd be really horrible to introduce you guys. These are my bad vessel friends. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like the community as a whole. So it's a neat thing. Billy and Gail, we've never talked this much. John, we haven't until just recently. I think you have you just started listening to the podcast? So most of you know I had a seizure. So me and John got to hang out a lot because he works right down the road for me, and it's about a 30-minute drive. And I know you have been listening to the podcast, but you didn't always listen to this podcast, did you? Why'd you start listening? You're like, my friend's getting weird. I need to check up on him and listen to his podcast.
I felt like if we were riding in the car together, I needed to have some sort of conversation topics to hit on. So I started listening to your podcast.
No, are you serious? Are you being serious?
It's called doing homework and preparatory work, man. Otherwise, just awkward silence with you.
John, we're like best friends, man. You didn't have to worry about that.
Joey is great at awkward silence.
Dude, one time we were walking on
that
campus
is
in college,
funny.
and we walked for a long time in just absolute silence. And you told me it's true friendship when you can walk this long in silence and be still really good friends. And in my head, I thought, yeah, but it's just really awkward. No, I started listening to it because we were riding together, but I kind of listened to some of it. I'm full disclosure, I'm not a regular listener. Sometimes the topics get kind of squirrely, and I'm like, I'm not interested in that bullshit, so I walk off. Mm-hmm. Like, the Ouija, or not the Ouija board, the seance one, I kind of wasn't interested.
Yep.
Not that I'm downing on your show. I mean, no. I love it.
No, you can say
5 stars.
No,
right
you
there.
can say whatever you want. Gail, I think what's neat about you is the church that, when I look back on my church upbringing, there's two churches involved, and you were a part of both of them. So my earliest memories from going from a Catholic and then starting to go to a church, First Assembly in Charleston. I don't think it's called that anymore, to my knowledge, but that's how I know your parents originally. That's how I met your sister and you. But you guys left. We hung around there for years, and then when we changed churches, that's how I met John for the first time. Billy, I knew him from high school. Gail, I knew you from the old church and from high school. And tribute to your dad, who is an angel of a man. And I almost got a lump in my throat, so I know it's tough for you to talk about, but just dying in the, what do you call it if you're a policeman, in the line of duty, I would say, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in a very, very horrible accident. But golly, I mean, I know you say these sorts of things, especially people in that line of work, but really was a special guy. So, man, just old school child memories. And really, this is really funny, man. I have always loved you so much. And in youth group, you and I don't think we were ever in the youth group at the same time, because you graduated the year I was a junior in high school, and that's when I started going to church with John and Gail. But this is really funny, and I'm going to get into more details of this story. But I had like a secret advisor that was telling me about all these people in this new youth group, and you were being this is funny. Like, you were told as the one of the only guys that kept it real from practicing your faith. There's like, I mean, Billy, I think he's really the only guy that really practices what he preaches. I remember that. And you guys are really going to get a kick out of some of how clear my memories are. But here's what I remember with you, Billy.
Wait. Who was the secret advisor?
You can name.
You can't leave that.
Name and shame.
Let's do that later. But yes, I will.
Okay.
I will.
We'll see if we can figure it out.
So, Billy, I knew you before you started going to church, And so you have to keep in mind, listeners, that I was very legalistic and very, very like, oh gosh, I'm scared of any kind of perverted talk or cussing or anything. So I was overly sensitive, but I do remember you before the church days as a super, super nice guy. But I remember you being kind of like a perverted middle schooler too. That was just my perspective. Like as a sixth grader, you would have been an eighth grader. Were you a perverted young man?
Yeah, my middle school phase went way longer than it should have.
Are you a perverted young man? I'm just kidding. Billy, what we were talking about before you came on, though, is we were talking about the interconnectedness and how you wouldn't be, outside of God doing something else. You wouldn't even be in this mix right now if it wasn't for you dating Gail's sister. But we were talking about the fact that Gail corrected me that it was her dad that invited you to church. And I was curious, and I have never asked you this question, and I really am genuinely interested. Like, did you have like a transformation experience at a young age? Because from my perspective, seeing and interacting with you as, again, from my vantage point, the perverted older guy that told nasty jokes, and then all of a sudden I see you in youth group and you're like the shining example of, what everybody, hey, be more like Billy. I mean, you were the guy. You were the guy. I mean, John, you were younger than Billy too. Like, was he kind of exemplified? Like, be like Billy. Like, Billy's the kind of guy you wanted to be.
John Paul, and then there was Billy.
Hey, all joking aside, though, Gail and John, wouldn't y'all agree that Billy was one of those guys that it's kind of like you kind of wanted to be more like him?
Wow.
Kind of, right? Like from a doing the right thing standpoint. Maybe I don't know the real Billy. Maybe I was duped.
No, Billy was always the leader, the spiritual leader. He was the older,
I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Wow, I never felt that way. I just figured I was as mixed up as everybody else, and maybe I did a better job of hiding it.
I thought you had your shit together a lot more than the rest of us.
Wow, there you go. And Gail would know.
Yeah.
So there you go. A peek behind the curtain.
There you go. There you go. All right. So we're going to do, before we get into the meat of this conversation, we're going to do a yes and no activity. So I will tell you that at the end, if you want to write down, I don't like the fact that I had to just camp at yes or no, I'll give you a chance when we're done with the whole list for you to be able to go back and say, hey, I want to explain my answer. But for right now, you got to keep it yes or no, and we'll all have to answer these. I mean, you're grown-ass people, so you can say, no, I can't make you do what you don't want to do. But yes or no, were you terrified of hell as a teen? And yes. I tell you what, I'll just start, and then we'll go Gail, then John, then Billy. Yes, I was.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Billy?
I would say for John, it was his mom and hell equally terrified. and I might also agree with that. I was pretty terrified of John's mom as well. But yes, hell was definitely a motivating factor in my teenage years.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Billy. I never let you answer, or maybe I never even got to the actual question. I want to know, was there a spiritual shift that you can look back on and say, I had a transformative experience? Like Val, and I end up dating this girl, Val. Her dad invites me to church, and boom, all of a sudden I'm a new creation. What the heck happened? I invited Jesus into my heart. What was it, like a big, Facing the Giants sort of movie type experience? The perverted middle schooler gives his heart to Jesus, and it's magical.
I will say, so I was dating Valerie, and one Wednesday night I'm hanging out at the Bell House, and her dad walks in and just looks at me and says, "You're going to church." And I was like, "Yeah, I can go to church tonight." And he's like, "I didn't invite you, son. You're going." And that was the beginning. And I went. I found, it's cliche. I found community, and it became my friend group, and I just sort of became immersed in it. And I think it probably changed a big part of my teenage life, because yeah, I was mixed up, and I was the perverted middle schooler, now freshman in high school, now a little bit of a sophomore in high school, and I was just an idiot, and youth group helped.
Yeah. Now, did you have any spiritual upbringing at all? Like any sort of, were you Catholic? Did you go to mass or what?
I was Methodist.
Methodist,
which,
okay.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, like my parents taught Sunday school and things like that, but my memories of growing up in the Methodist church was trying to sneak out. Like the moment the pastor started preaching or speaking or whatever they call it there, I would hit the floor, and I was like, army crawling my way toward the back door trying to get out. And I probably by the time I hit middle school, 6th grade, my parents stopped going, and so I stopped going.
Yeah. And would we all say, and this would be really sucky if one of y'all had to say no, maybe we would edit it, because then it really would be awkward, and like a real bad awkward, not like a happy Joey awkward. But Gail and Jon, like, did you guys had decent, better than most childhoods, I'm imagining, right? Like as far as like you had a good mom and dad. I know that with Jon. Gail, I'm pretty sure with you, Billy, I have no idea. But with Jon and Gail, y'all would say pretty good household, right? We all came from pretty healthy upbringings. What about you, Billy? Did you have a good mom and dad and all that? Yeah.
Same. Parents still married. Probably now looking back, just as weird as anybody else's parents, but yeah, pretty good upbringing.
What did they think about how involved that you were even after? So, we obviously, I think y'all heard that you did not marry Gail's sister. So that was that was like a year and a half, 2 years of your life. I don't know how long, honestly, but to your parents, they're like, oh, wow, Billy's still at this church. My Lord. What was that a neat thing for them to see you so involved and excited about church community?
My oldest sister at this point was Christian, so she was all for it. My mom was just very supportive and was all for anything that kept me out of trouble and gave me purpose. So God bless Mom. I remember one time, because we used to do the drama stuff, and I don't remember what it was. It must have been a Christmas thing or something. And I invited my parents, and my mom was, of course we're coming. And my dad was just like, I don't know about this fly-by-night church. I don't know about these Pentecostals.
Shout out to Jinx.
Yeah, he kept it realer than Billy at the time.
Yeah, and I do need to chime in here when you say drama team. So we had a youth group that I would say Wednesdays and Sunday nights met, and it was open to anybody. And then there was a huge percentage of the youth group that was also had the option of being on a drama team that eventually took either full dramas or little skits and stuff on the road, usually in the summer. I think I was only in this youth group for a couple of years, so you guys have most of that experience. But does that about encapsulate the drama team for our listeners' sake, Billy? You think that? Okay, cool.
I think so.
All right, let's continue with our yes or no questions. Were you terrified of the rapture as a teen? I think I was, but I don't remember as much as I do hell. But I'll say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I didn't start out that way, because
Gotcha.
I remember I grew up Methodist, and I even remember going to my dad and saying like, "Hey, have you heard about the rapture?" And he's like, "The word rapture is never even mentioned in the Bible." And of course, my faith is like, I'm like, "What do you? How dare you, you heretic? You don't even know. You're so lost."
Are you speaking against LaHaye?
Yeah.
Are you?
There's a whole book series, Dad. I don't know if you know this. But yeah, I became terrified of the rapture. Funny story, I remember Valerie and I had gone out, and then I took her home, and the entire family was gone. And we had this moment where we were like, holy crap. The rapture happened. and we missed it.
And y'all had
And
just
you were
made
left
out and y'all
behind.
felt horrible.
There's no comment.
All right. Did you feel compelled to witness at school as a teen? Yes. Gail?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Did you try, John is in driving distance to my house right now, so he can come and kick my ass for this question, but did you try really hard as a teen? And I use these words, I chose these words carefully. So did you try really hard as a teen not to have any sexual urges? I would say yes.
Yes.
I'm waiting on John to answer before I do.
Yeah, try not to have sexual urges.
Yeah. Like resist nature. Like resist.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to flee youthful lust. Resist the devil and he will flee.
There you go.
There it is.
There you go. Do you think your church upbringing was good for you? I'll stick with the rules, unlike Billy, and I'm going to say I'll explain later, but and I was just messing with you, Billy. I'm going to say no. But that would be really hard to say that without being able to explain myself. But I'll go to you, Gail. Do you think your church upbringing was good for you?
I will say yes, with the stipulation of it showed me what I didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
John?
I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say yes.
All right. Are you raising your kids relatively similar to how you were taught in a youth group? So we're talking not how your parents taught you, but basically the sort of stuff we're talking about tonight, how we all know that we were taught. Are you teaching your kids that way? I would say for me, no.
No.
Johnny John.
I'm good. I mean, I don't know. That's a tough question. I'm trying to think of what I've sorted out.
Sure. That's fair.
I'm going to say yes, but somewhat no. So I'm going to yes, and I want a caveat.
Cool.
I'm not going to pull a Billy.
I've made it abundantly clear that you can explain at the end.
Yeah.
So you're good.
Well, Billy's been explaining the whole time, so we know.
But Billy is the exception to the rule.
Right. Listen.
Billy.
Hey, I'm still.
Hope's on Paul and Billy, the explainer.
I'm still taken back that John started listening to this podcast because we were going to start sharing the car together in the mornings. He's like, "Holy shit, my best friend! I don't know what to talk about."
I need topics
John,
of
I would have
conversation.
gotten you, dude. That's my strength. I would have made it. I would have made it just feel fine and dandy for you, man. I wouldn't have let it been awkward and quiet.
We
Joey
would
have
about your family and all that stuff, and I didn't want to talk about this shit.
Joey would have put on music and tapped his thumb on the steering wheel. Well, he doesn't drive, but tapped it.
That'd been really exciting. Stop touching the steering wheel.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Billy, did you answer that last question?
I did not answer, but I will. And
Yes,
the answer
please
is no.
Okay. Just to remind our listeners, that last question was, are you raising your kids relatively similarly to how you were taught in youth group? Next question, did you ever intake illegal substances on a youth group trip? I did not.
No.
Nope.
No.
Good. Gosh, if Billy would have said yes, I would have been so upset, and it would have probably ruined my faith, and I would have turned my back on God. Did you live... I really like this question. Did you live a pretty significantly different life than most of your peers because of your faith? I would say yes for me.
Yes.
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 All right. And last but not least, if you could go back in time, would you do it almost completely differently when it comes to how your faith informed your life at that stage? I can repeat that if you need me to, but I would say I don't have it in a regretful category, like it causes me pain. I think I've worked through a lot of that, but for sure, I would have allowed my faith to inform my life differently at that age. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
man, I'm going to be different and say no.
Gotcha. All right. So I tell you what, we obviously can't go through and explain all these answers, but Billy, I'd love to hear you unpack that a little bit. I would love to delve in just for a split second as far as why I said that my upbringing was not good for me. But Billy, explain that real quick. Why'd you say no?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy that I said with raising my kids, am I doing it the same way? And I said no. And then I said, you asked, would I change anything? And I also said no, but not for the same reason. I think I know that at that point in my life, I was pretty lost, and I don't think I could connect the dots to having the life I have today if I didn't have those experiences, even the ones that weren't so great, or the ones that looking back, I go, man, that probably wasn't healthy. But I think overall, I like where I ended up. And so I don't know that I would change too much of that. I also think I've learned a lot through that time of my life and through those experiences.
That's wisdom right there, baby. That's wisdom.
Thank you.
All right. We're getting old, man. I'm just going to call it when I see it. When I hear wisdom, we're getting old. We've paid our dues, man. I'm going to tell you. Billy's speaking wisdom right now.
Yeah.
No, it's good stuff, man.
I have a question to that, though. Joey, John, and I had, I don't want to say religion and church. Well, we did religion and church in our lives from a very, very young age. And while you had it as, your little Methodist upbringing, but you were more involved, do you think that has anything to do with your not having a regret, is because you weren't?
You bring up a good point, because
let me just make sure I understand. So Gail, you're saying you weren't as immersed at a young age in some of the unhealthy stuff, and I don't even know if John would consider it unhealthy. I think Gail, you would, and I would. Is that what you're saying? Like you didn't have all of that as a child?
He wasn't as exposed to the whole churchy aspect, like as ingrained.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good.
That makes sense.
Point out. Yeah, I think so.
No, I think it makes total sense. I mean, I came into youth group somewhere in my sophomore year of high school, I think. And yeah, so I didn't go through the whole junior high thing, and I definitely didn't come up through like kids' church and things like that. So a lot of the stuff that gets hammered in at a young age about legalism and things like that, I didn't really have to deal with, because I came in Methodist where a lot of that wasn't taught. And I think I had a different framework by the time I made it into my youth group age. And maybe that affected or allowed me not to be affected by some of it.
Yeah. I want to say the reason I answered how I did the question, do I think church upbringing was good for me? And I said, no. I think there is an innate goodness in church community that is based on love, or centered around love. And I'm, in church community, it's centered around the love of Jesus and us worshiping. And I think whenever you have that, there is good for your heart. There's good influence. There's meaningful experiences. There's stuff that I can think back on and it warms my heart, because I think community is inherently good. So I really keyed in on the upbringing word, and I feel like upbringing to me is more of a teachings handed down, and that, so for me, church upbringing is how we were collectively being taught to approach faith and how it should look in the world. And for me, all of my experiences at the church that we're talking about pretty much was as a teen. And so, does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. And if it didn't make sense, I'm sure somebody will leave a comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like collectively we, I mean, Gail, I'm interested in knowing where you would say you have departed what you would consider most of your main ones, and we are going to get to whether or not we consider ourselves a Christian. Obviously our listeners know where I stand with that. And guys, I texted y'all this earlier, there's just we've got to do a two-parter. Billy's already called this thing a series, but let me make sure you all are clued in on how mental illness was also playing into my experience. And I have to, especially as I get older, recognize that I think the hurt was deeper because of the mental health component. And I thought of a lighthearted story that we can all laugh about and not all get bummed out about, but that I think accurately depicts the sort of mental twistedness I was in. So I'm not going to say her name on here, but there was a girl in high school that I had a crush on. I know Gail knows who she is. Billy, I would assume too. And I remember taking her out, and I remember her talking about our youth group and basically saying how much she loved it, and then saying something to the effect of she's Baptist, and the one thing that she doesn't understand about Stafford, who is our youth group leader, who we all absolutely adore. It's John's uncle, by the way. But she basically said, how you guys teach, it seems like y'all think that y'all could lose your salvation. And she said, as a Baptist, I mean, I certainly do not think that is on the table of discussion. And she's just like, that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Well, guys, I felt like I was in a position of, I have got to save this girl from hell, because that's not true. If I don't say something, then I'm literally going to, her blood's on my hands, because if she does whatever she wants to do and I didn't tell her that that's not what you're supposed to do, then I'm going to go to hell. And I didn't speak up. Y'all, it plagued me. It plagued me. I thought to myself, because we didn't continue to date, which I think another reason for that was my legalism and like, oh my gosh, she doesn't believe the same way, and just my mind just going crazy. Y'all, this is horrible. This is absolutely hideous. I'll use the word hideous. About a year later, I was so obsessed and OCD about this girl's blood being on my hands, I wrote her a snail mail letter. Now, we went out as sophomores. I sent her this damn letter as a junior in high school, basically telling her that I should have spoken up. Y'all, I had classes with this girl. I had to see her. Like that's so there was some twistedness there, and I recognize the OCD, but it was a cyclical thing. It was, I would take verses very literal when it says, if you know the good things to do and you don't do it, you're in sin. Well, in this case, the good to do would be to tell her the truth. And if I'm not doing it, I am like an unrepentant sinner until I, correct the behavior. So I want to throw that out there, that I also recognize my mental illness was for sure a big culprit in all of this. And I also, and I'm about to ask you guys as just general reflections and whether there's any bitterness. And Gail, I just want to kind of hear where you stand and where you feel you're at in your faith. I'll say, I do feel like I had to grow out of a lot of harmful stuff, and I don't know if I was ever bitter at any person. I think maybe not even struggling with bitterness. I think maybe anger at just how much it hurt. To have to, I think, look back on a lot of that time that, John, I mean, for example, you and I had great times together in college. Dude, I was in mental prison. I mean, you saw me laughing, you saw me, cutting up and joking around, but I mean, behind the scenes, dude, I was a messed up person. I mean, when you were not in the dorm room, there were times when I was like frantically trying to, pray like for God to, heal my depression or my sadness or to help me not sin. And I mean, it's just like that's college. I wasn't a laid back, oh, this is awesome, we just get to play video games all the time. There was that dark part too. But Gail, catch us up to speed. I know Billy and John are Christians. I don't I'm gonna guess you're not, or would you consider yourself a Christian?
I am not.
So unpack your journey a little bit. We don't have all day. All right.
Okay. I think a lot of it changed when I went away to Lee.
Okay, so you went to Lee College.
Yes.
Okay.
You see a lot. You hear a lot. And when
let me say for our listeners, Lee College it's put out there by the Church of God denomination, like it's an accredited school by the Church of God denomination. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
More of that ingrained, gotta follow up with it. But I came home. I tried to insert myself back into the youth group a little bit, and that was a really rough time. My parents decided that they were divorcing, and I was pulled aside and was told, this divorce is a really bad look for the church. We really don't have a spot for you anymore.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
A spot for you in the youth group?
Yes. That, I would say, began the hurt.
Was that as a leader or as?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It was pulled aside by two leaders at the same time, and we discussed that it's a bad look. Your parents are going through XYZ. And, at the time, my dad was on the church council, and, mom was homemaker, nursery, whatever. So it became a really bad look for the church. And so that became my start of the separation of it. And I threw myself into other things,
And about how old are you? So this is college age.
Yes.
You feel really hurt by your church community, and so you just start pushing away. So you just kind of like not showing up and.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I think I attended 2 more services after that conversation, and I just said, this is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried several other churches, and I said, you know what, maybe I just need to take a break from church. It'll heal my heart, because at this point I was, I had little faith in the people in the church at all now, because everything I had ever known, we were there, 4 or 5 times a week. Everything I had ever known was like snatched away in a matter of minutes just from a conversation. I just never went back. Well, I don't want to say never. We tried again. I took my husband. We tried the same church. We were like, maybe it changed. I was telling Billy that a lot of incidents happened. And we decided that was not for us. And so it became, my husband came from Jehovah's Witness and Catholic background. So yes, we have Jehovah's Witness and Church of God, and so we decided to raise our kids as freely as can be. We could guide them. We let them choose we tell them about Jesus. We tell them, but we let them choose if they wanted to go to church. Hey, do you want to go to church? If you want to go to, there's other religions. Let's explore other religions and thoughts, and and that's kind of how we have raised our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hate hearing. I mean, obviously, I hate hearing when anybody gets hurt, but especially when it's from people that you're counting on to love you and stuff. And I have sometimes I like to think, I wonder if you had the opportunity to talk to that person again, if they would be like, I'm so sorry. Like, that was just the biggest, because I look back on, being a pastor and I have no idea who this person is, but just being a pastor for so long, I have made some horrible mistakes and said things, sometimes even just out of complete ignorance, that was like super hurtful. And I wish I could take it back. And I was trying to do the right thing, but I was just flat out stupid. So, it's just an interesting thought experience. I wonder if you saw that person today, whether or not they'd be like, I'm so sorry. But
I spoke to them about 5 years ago, and they didn't totally remember the conversation. But they kind of doubled down on it and was like, well, it was really an awkward time for everyone. So, yeah.
Well, and don't forget, John and Billy and I, we're part of that same church, and we love you. We love you, girl.
You know
That's
what?
good stuff.
You put the name.
We
You
got
give
you.
us the name. We'll take
Yeah.
care of it.
Billy's
I'm
got
still-
connections.
I'm still waiting for the informer.
Yeah, you gotta
I
hit
have
the
it written
informer
down,
first.
not to forget to ask about the informer.
And the
We gotta
girl
do
you
it like a game of Clue where we got like the different card. We can mark the stuff off.
and the girl you sent the letter to, because girls got to know.
Gail, a lot of people like you, they and just the little bit that I have remember about you as a high schooler and the little bit I'm picking up on you right now, I'm pretty sure you can take some pretty direct questions. A lot of people would, am I correct? Like
Yes.
I don't have to tippy toe or anything.
No.
I think a lot of people would say, of course there's people in the church that are going to hurt you. It's made of people. People make mistakes. People do things like that. Why would you walk away from it just because of getting hurt? I would imagine that's not the only reason. I would imagine there was probably also some things deep down where you're just like, I just don't know if that makes sense. Like, were there some belief shifts going on internally too? Or was it just a matter of, man, if a situation like this can happen, I just don't want anything to do with any of it?
I think
Does that question make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I began to think differently at college because then, you, like you said, you start to question everything you were ever raised to believe. At least I did. We were talking about the holding hands with somebody's spouse, the whole, I don't want to, women's rights. And I don't want to get into that because, I just started questioning everything. But then when I got home and that happened, you say it's not because, the people say whatever, the people aren't the church, but those are the people we hold in high regard in the church that are supposed to be the ones that love on everybody that, and yet they failed miserably for somebody that they called their own.
Right.
So imagine how somebody that just walked in the door feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. To completely drop the ball on love by the church is a really big deal. Really big deal when that's the ball that you drop, in my opinion. Yeah, for sure. No, I feel you.
I wonder too, and I'm just going to throw out a question because I spent a little time on the Lee College campus. I always had, and this is kind of back to the question of how would you raise your kids different, or did you raise your kids different? And I said yes. Part of that comes from, I feel like our youth group days, and especially for those that went off to a very conservative Christian college, we almost were ingrained with this mindset of, if you do this is what will happen immediately. Like, if the moment you try a controlled substance, you will be addicted forever, and it will destroy your life, and then you will go to hell. And I think when we hit those college ages and we realized that that's not the case, it really caused us, at least for me, to question more about what I was taught, and was that really accurate? Because I was told XYZ for so long, and now I have seen it played out, and that's not what happened at all. Is this really accurate? Did any of that play in, Gail? I'm just curious.
I don't think so much as like the things we do ever played a part in my choice, I guess. I've always I don't know, you guys have known me. I've always kind of done my own thing. Yeah, there were, repent every Sunday because, your girl done messed up all the time.
And I was repenting every Sunday of meaningless, worthless, stupid stuff that I had no business feeling guilty about, because I was like the big brother who was self-righteous. We were both in pain, Gail. I promise. Oh man, yeah. Hey, I want to get into beliefs a little bit. So. John, like I said, you and I talk all the time, but for our listeners' sake, Billy, I'm curious. I'm catching you here that it sounds like some things have shifted since high school. For me, I am certainly a Christian, but it has not been without a lot of work and diligence and abiding by, I guess, me and the Holy Spirit. But just my whole theological paradigm is just the old one is kind of obliterated when it comes to, I think, even how God works and how all-encompassing God's love is. My guess would be that a lot of our brothers and sisters in our old faith community would a lot of them would say I'm not a Christian, and then I think a lot of them would probably question whether I'm not a Christian. And I would say less because of where I stand on LGBTQ issues. I think a lot of Christians could be like, I disagree. I think the Bible speaks clearly, but not doubt my faith. But when it comes to at least some of the non-affirming Christians I'm around, but when it comes to my theological, even scriptural leanings into a universal salvation, I think that's when for me, I believe that's what Jesus was about and is about. I think that is where it gets really sticky. You could imagine. I really do believe that, and how that's turned my world upside down with just how I interact with people, and I feel able to love people more. So I think people would have a big problem with that. All in all, though, I believe Jesus is the central figure in the universe. I don't know how it works, but I do believe God in flesh. Like I don't feel like my traditional theological Nicene Apostles' Creed sort of stuff is I'm not really in conflict with much, if anything. John, you want to try to give a little snapshot of yours as we wrap up part one, or do you guys got another 30 minutes or what? But give us a little bit. What do you think, John? Change much these days, these last 25
No,
years?
I guess I had a different spin on everything because I was probably had a little bit stronger connection with Stafford being my uncle and my family being pretty involved in the church. And I stayed in the church a pretty good ways after college. I went back and worked in the church and things like that. Some of the things that I like when my wife and I met and we got married, that kind of changed a little bit of how we had to do some meeting in the middle of the road as to where we were going to go to church.
Who introduced you to your wife?
That would be Joey Svendsen.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah.
That's cool that you would bring that up. Go ahead, John.
I would also
nice
point
of you.
out that I think we're the one couple you set up that stayed together. The rest of them, you got zero.
There's only
terrible
two,
track record.
man. Hey, 50%, that ain't bad.
50%.
Keep your day
It's
job.
baseball. Baseball, that's a good average.
Sorry, John. Go ahead.
But I mean, I think that for me, everything that I learned as a child, and as a teenager, and even as a young adult, or after college, I was able to take that and build my own foundation. And I was a little bit, I was stuck in some of the legalism for a lot of it. Like I look back on some of my decisions and things like that, and I can definitely see where, yeah, I probably was being a little too legalistic on a lot of this stuff. But I've actually, over the past couple of years, just kind of, I would say having children changed pretty much everything that I considered about my relationship with Christ. That really
Ooh, like how?
changed. Well, I think it changed my viewpoint on how Christ sees us. And I think the punishment dynamic, there's discipline and then there's punishment. And I feel like Christ is more about the discipline for you to grow versus the punishment. And the level of love I have for my kids, I can see how God would interact and with me is interacting with me. And so that kind of changed how my relationship with God went, because I began to see him more as a parent that he is supposed to be versus a domineering governor, And so I think that's where I kind of started picking a little bit more at the things I had as far as legalism. But
What
honestly,
kind of, like, what did legalism look like for adult John?
Well, I
Like
mean, I
just
think
feeling bad about saying certain words, or
no, I don't
because you
fucking care
cuss
about
like
any
crazy.
of these damn words.
I was gonna
I
say,
work
if
in
you
the
feel
trucking
guilty about
industry,
cussing,
buddy.
my
If you want some
lord, just
language, I can sling it. No, you talk about the LGBTQ art and that stuff. There was a girl in our high school class that came out as a lesbian in our high school, and I went to a Baptist high school, and it was like you might as well have set off a nuclear bomb in the middle of our senior trip, and it was very, it was very awkward. She was very much ostracized by a lot of people, and I looked back on that, and I still feel like terrible about it. And then when my daughter was in a school where there was a lot of the LGBTQ. There's got to be a shorter term um, without so many letters.
I mean,
I'm
there
just gonna
is,
say,
but we're not going to tell it to you because we like hearing you struggle over it.
we just want to see you.
here
Actually,
we go. I'm
I
just
think
gonna,
there's
you
been
know what? I'm gonna throw down, and it may come. All that gay shit started coming out, and I said, "Listen, baby, you're called by God to love people and to treat everybody with kindness, no matter what." And that's where I think I feel like there was a shortcoming on in some of our upbringing was we were almost in a judgmental point. Hey, you can't like what you're saying where you wrote the letter because you're judging her immortal soul.
Mm.
I wasn't put here to judge. I'm not here to judge what you do. That's somebody else's responsibility, and it's somebody higher than me. So I've come down on the love and kindness side of the map, and
yeah,
that's where I
that's
live. And I don't know
beautiful,
if that
man.
answered the question.
No,
I kind of dozed off and lost the question along the way. So
no, it does, but
I'm
I want to
kidding.
say this for you because you may have felt like maybe I should be careful on this one. The school that your daughter started at is where my kids go, and I will say it for you. It is if you are going to be outspoken in any sort of conservative way, they will eat you up. And
Yeah,
it is
it's
just
not.
as unloving as what a lot of Christians are criticized for. And my kids would say the same thing. No, it's bad. If you see the world a certain way, and I thank God that my kids aren't that way, but it's no joke. There's a love problem on both sides. That's for dang sure.
I was really nervous about having this discussion, and I will just say this to John. Just because of the way we grew up, I was really worried. I am the mom of one of those LGBTQIA plus people.
What's the I and the A mean?
What's the I and
I
the A?
just
God knows, man.
Look it up.
Oh
No,
shit.
hey, I gotta tell y'all this. Last episode, so the last episode, Matt Oxley, who's a regular guy, queer, dates a trans guy, just added those two letters on us. Stoy Prelo had the same reaction John did, and Matt said the same thing Gail just daggum said. Look it up. It must be
Look
like a
it up.
thing. All the LGBTQ people and their parents, they all are being told to say, look it up.
Look it up.
I honestly was worried because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to become Mama Bear.
Oh,
And I'm
gosh.
going to have to literally like rip somebody apart. Poor John. Because you were in for it, had you. Because,
Hey,
just the upbringing, and my head went back to it all. And I seriously considered pulling out of doing this because I was like,
because of me?
well, because of what you represented back then. Does that make sense? Because in my head, your family was like the Mecca, the family.
Yeah.
And
I mean, John is royalty.
yes,
John is royalty.
Yeah. It's
John
almost,
is Church of God royalty. I like,
yeah.
and
It's
I
guilt
was
by
like,
association.
and I
Whoa,
said,
whoa, guilt. There is no guilt. I believe that's biblical too.
and I was so worried that I would have to
But
not
Gail,
hurt John's feelings, but hurt John's feelings.
but Gail, are you
You have to have feelings for them to get hurt.
Gail, are you saying just how you see the connectivity of church experience in John's family, given just how big of a part they are? Or are you saying there were certain things about John that you remember? Because I couldn't imagine that. Like,
No, not John specifically, but to me, John's family represents the church.
Gotcha.
Like, they are the church that was,
So it's almost like you're getting on a podcast with an ambassador. Like, oh, shoot,
Kind
I got to
of.
deal with one of those royalties.
Kind of, yeah. And I was a little worried. And glad to hear you fall on the side of love. And, not your job to judge.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yep. Would you say, Gail, that you struggle with bitterness when you reflect back on church community? Then we'll get to Billy's faith and where you're at. And then would you guys be down for a part 2, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
I look back with my days. I have very fond memories, like some of the best times in my life. As a matter of fact, I tell my kids all the time about my experiences with the youth group and how great it was. And as a matter of fact, I joke that this one time at band camp, because all my stories are leading up to youth group and youth camp and firepower. And my later years, I would say I am a little bitter. I'm bitter. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say you've raised your kids right if they knew the reference in American Pie.
Yes.
All right, the mystery man. In fact, I would say when it comes to this question, where you're at in your faith, I think I picked up I had an accurate guess for Gail, just because of the little bit we've interacted on Facebook. And then again, John is a non-issue. We know each other. Billy, I really am curious. I know you're still a Christian. You communicated that you couldn't podcast, I think, tomorrow night because of church activity. So you're plugged in just like me. But where are you at with your faith? Any major shifts? And if so, what would you say major shifts are?
No shift at all. Everybody's going to hell. Sorry. As the Pope, I have to say that.
Yes.
No, I think there's been a big shift. A couple of things, if I was to point back to, is because I lead in a church. I'm on the church board. I lead grow groups. I'm the pastor everybody goes to when they want to get married, and that's my thing. And so I've wrestled with some of my core belief, I would say, over the last, probably decade. And we had at one point a couple that was coming to our group, our small group, and they were lesbian. And, I was just like, how do I handle this? God, why would you send these people to me? Because I'm like so awkward sometimes. And as we started getting into discussion and I got to know them more and more, I realized these ladies can out-pray me. They can out-scripture me. They out-love me in all measures of what it is to be a Christian. Like, they are light years ahead of me. And I have something to learn from them. And it really got me to thinking. And especially over the pandemic, when everybody in the world is deconstructing and they're thinking through, I was just looking for anything I could to just, our church up here in Chicago wasn't meeting. I was like, I'm going to start a Bible study. And I started a Bible study from somebody that was actually a Methodist pastor from a church that my auntie went to. And I was like, well, if this dude was good enough for my aunt, then he's good enough for me. And I started listening, and it was Genesis 1. And the first bit of his teaching was about how Genesis is not one narrative, it's 3 narratives, and they're interwoven. And these are the things And I was like, whoa, time out. I have literally never heard this in my entire life. And I was just like, my thinking through my stance on where I am with Jesus is, there are a billion or so Christians, and everybody thinks they've got it right. So what makes me think I've got it right? And so it's really opened my eyes to that. I love what John said about legalism. Really opened my eyes to when it really comes down to it. My call and what God put me on this planet to do is to love Him and to love people. And if I can't, and He says those are the chief commands, right? So if I can't nail those, it really does not matter if I'm doing any of the other stuff. Like if I'm not doing the number 1 and number 2 on the list, then I really have no seat at the table. So while I'm still figuring it all out, that's my thing. It's like, let me just do these things the best that I possibly can and love people where they're at. And if they say this is what their relationship with God looks like, then more power to you. And I love you for it.
Sweet. All right, so we'll end with a story, and it will bring full circle the informant talk. So when I was I'll give you guys. So when I was a sophomore in high school, this was when I wasn't in youth group with you guys. I hadn't met John, for instance, and y'all's drama team. John, would you have been on the drama team that year? It was when y'all did the it was the biggest one. It was the one where Billy, I think, starred. It wasn't Battleground. It was the one, the spiritual warfare one.
Yeah. What was the name of that, Gail?
Is it called Spiritual Warfare one?
I think it was called Warfare or something like that. The Warfare drama.
Warfare.
Yeah.
Yes. So y'all came to our church and performed it. And I would say at the time I remember feeling like, man, that was powerful, it was anointed. And my aunt Joan, she had already started going to y'all's church, and she literally said, because she left the church that we were at for reasons, and she had some negative things, and she's just like, the youth group that you guys are in right now, look at the youth group that you could be a part of if you just left and joined those guys. Like, look at what they're up to, and on fire for God and all that stuff. And then I became friends with my informant, and he started telling me all the bad twisted shit that all of y'all were up to, and that's when he told
Mike Cologne.
And we sounded like fun.
Mike Cologne.
And that's when he said, Billy, I think he's kind of the only one that keeps it real and doesn't do bad things.
I have a Mike Cologne story.
Hey,
I never said Mike Cologne.
It is. You get his Mike Cologne, man. You just
is it Mike Cologne? You gotta fess up now. We called it out. That's our guess.
I don't know. I think the youth group people are going to listen to this. I want to leave them hanging too.
Nah.
Then I expect a text in the group chat. Just saying.
Hey, but what's funny is at the time, I promise you, I was very disheartened. I was at that stage of faith where I was like, oh, maybe I am in a youth group full of people. This is very prideful thinking. But I had the thought of, oh, maybe I can be in a youth group with other people who are serious about Christ like me. And it was disappointing from that immature spiritual place of faith. And one thing that I really want to get into you guys with in a second episode is the whole burden of evangelicalism at that early of an age with all the other stuff we're dealing with. I just don't know if that's good. I don't care what your theology is. I do not know if it is ever good to put that burden on kids in high school. All the stuff that and I mean, you want to make them feel bad about not witnessing enough? Come on, man. I mean, I think as we get older, we look back and we realize just how young we were, and we didn't need to be carrying that kind of responsibility. But we could touch on that in part 2.
You mean you weren't inviting people to see you at the poll? Like, that was it.
Oh man, See, Billy, you were excited about that kind of stuff. That was a sacrifice for me. That was standing up for God. That was like, I got to do this. It's the right thing to do. I know Billy will be there. And you looked all excited and on fire for God. I'm like, oh, gosh, who's looking? And I'm scared. And I know I'm taking a stand, but I'm still scared.
And because Billy's going to rat you out at the next youth meet that you were not at the poll. Yeah.
I believe Valerie and I were both on the news for being at the poll.
Yeah.
That is so
Well,
sweet,
yeah,
Billy.
you.
That is
Yeah,
so
you.
I'm a celebrity. What can I say?
Awesome. Shout out to our youth group homies.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sweet.
Shouts out and love to the church fam. You know who you are.